How are y'all doing today? Well, again, as she said, my name is Robert Coburn, and I stand before you today as the school board president of the Garaway Local School District. I'm here as an elected official, but more importantly, a concerned parent. The realization that legislators are reaching down into our classroom from Washington and Columbus left me with no choice but to take action in this fight against Common Core. So today I would ask you to journey for a few minutes into what Common Core has done in our local district and how the Common Core standards have affected Garaway, and I'm sure your district as well. My successful bid for elected office left me closer than ever to the community that I had been involved in for many years and the community that I was going to serve. The loudest concern from our teachers and administrators was that there was a loss of true education inside the classroom. They voiced to me and other board members that they felt that the children were being robbed of outside the box thinking to more of a by the test approach to education. Teaching to the test has become the objective, and this does not allow our kids to have any flexibility from what the mandates really are. Our teachers at Garaway have estimated that 80% of the education conducted inside the classroom is assessment-based education, with that percentage jumping to 100% a month or so before the actual assessment. So let's think about that. If we're doing this assessment twice a year, then that means that at least 2.5 months out of the year we're teaching 100% to the assessment, and those months leading up are all 80% to the assessment. How much real learning is going on in our classrooms across the state of Ohio? We need to be in the business of creating great thinkers, but with Common Core, we're in the business of creating great test takers. This Common Core culture doesn't stop there. It's not just a curriculum, it's an agenda. In the words of one of our teachers, Common Core is forcing teachers to teach something that they really don't believe in. And if they don't do that, they face what? Threats and intimidation. For example, a teacher within our district was teaching her class the Engage New York State math curriculum. You know, the math that's coming home in your homework that looks really whacked out that we didn't learn? Yeah. Well, her students were struggling to understand this new math, and so she did what we expect and what we love our teachers for. She independently problem solved and started teaching what the kids could understand at their level. What she was accosted with is atrocious. When the administration heard about what she was doing, she was told that she would either teach the Engage New York State math curriculum or they would find somebody who would in front of a class full of her students. This ultimatum, I believe, from the administration was not out of a dislike for the teacher, very respected teacher in our district, but more out of the pressure that's being put on not only our teachers, but our administration to implement this directive from the federal government. You see, the Garaway Board of Education has made it our highest priority to listen to the members of our community. I have spoken a great deal all around the state of Ohio about this thing called Common Core. We have made great strides to eradicate that culture that I just described happening in the classroom from ever happening again in our district. Whenever I came on the board, our district was one of the leading districts in the state of Ohio of implementing this thing called Common Core. And as I began to talk with other board members, listen to our teachers, hear the cries of our administrators that they had no control over the evaluation of their employees anymore, we began to sit down and take a hard look at what it really meant to be a leading school in implementing Common Core. I believe that the decision that we made to not allow this stuff to happen, to take a stand against the state government and against the federal government, has led to many gains around the state of Ohio. Thomas Jefferson once said, "The greatest danger to American freedom is a government that ignores the Constitution." And I would add to that quote, the law. Much has been said all across, I'm sure you've heard about park testing and air testing, and I would have to stress that this high-stakes testing was brought into our school district illegally. well, you don't have packets today, but I have it here with me that you can see. You can go to Garaway.org under communications and see the resolution that we passed, that we signed, sent to Columbus, sent to the governor. And on the top of the second page, it actually states, whereas the adoption of the National Consortium Assessments, PARC and AIR, for the use of Ohio's elementary and secondary achievement assessments violates Ohio Revised Code 3301.0710, which requires all state assessments to be created with the input of Ohio parents. Ladies and gentlemen, the atrocity that's being perpetrated in our classrooms is illegal for us to actually be implementing in our classrooms. And the state is mandating that we do it on a daily basis. There have been many consequences thrown around as I travel around and speak with board members and administrators around the state. Well, we'll have to retain students, or we'll lose funding for our district, or we're not even going to allow parents to opt their kids out of the testing. I've heard this all over the state of Ohio. I would say there is no consequence greater than turning the education of our most precious assets, our children, over to a government that so clearly disregards the laws that they wrote to protect our kids. They're violating them on a daily basis. We believe that the parent has the undeniable right to direct the education of their children. Our superintendent, Dr. James Millay, stated in a February 11th edition of the Budget newspaper, "I believe one of the most important elements in a child's education is parental support, involvement, and encouragement. That is the culture of Garaway, and with great leadership, we are forging ahead to honor parents' rights and students' rights in all education of children." John Jimenez once stated, "Is there not a cause and a people for that cause?" This is the question that our founding fathers and previous generations have dealt with when they've looked tyranny in the eye. In closing, the implementation of Common Core has and will continue to have a significant impact on our teachers, our administrators, and ultimately our budget. By adopting the Common Core standards, the state of Ohio is infringing on the rights of those not only in my district, but in every district throughout the state of Ohio. Our country was founded on the principles of three documents: the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Holy Bible. These three documents lay the foundation for freedom and liberty. The liberty we so desperately cling to is at stake. Liberty thrives or dies on what you, as citizens, parents, taxpayers, allow to have happen inside our classrooms. Because parents and family members, you have the power. Your local school board, as I represent 1,200 kids, am bound to represent the people in my district. The people in my district are fed up with this stuff. And it's time that if you are, your board knows it and makes decisions that support what their community wants. I encourage you and I implore you to go to your school board, speak to them politely, speak to them with passion, but ultimately speak to them with the force that if you're not going to stand for the children that you represent, then we'll find somebody who will, just like that administrator told our teacher. In 1787, the Constitutional Convention was held in secrecy, but the results were made known immediately. Mrs. Powell asked Benjamin Franklin, "Well, doctor, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy?" Franklin responded, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." I stand before you today to ask the same question. What do we have? Local control or the almighty hand of the federal government running our schools? Bill Gates stated in a quote that you read earlier from September of 2013 at Harvard University, "It would be great if our education stuff really worked. But that we won't know for about a decade." Well, I stand before you today as a dad of 2 girls in the public school system. And before I get the question afterwards, yes, they are opted out. But you know what? My children aren't an experiment. And I don't believe yours are either. And if you're a board member here and you're complicit in allowing the experiment to go on while you sat there quietly, you're complicit too. They're not an experiment. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. It's time for Ohio to rise up and get the right things right. To allow the people closest to the education of our children, the teachers, the administrators, and the elected officials that were elected to represent those kids, the local school board, to have control over what our children are taught and how they are assessed. You see, this is our responsibility. It's the essence of liberty, and it's the product of a representative republic. As I began to travel and speak around Ohio, and I've received letters from our governor about what we're doing, this quote came to mind. How do you convince a man of the truth when his livelihood depends on him not knowing it? Ladies and gentlemen, if we follow the money, we understand that this is not about our children's education. It's not about our buildings. It's not about our administrators, and it's not about making our kids smarter. Because, you know, we as administrators and as school board members, all we can do is provide them with the opportunity for their free will to engage. I'm sure that you all know that as kids we go through times in our lives where we're not engaged. I'm sure if I would have been in this system back then, I'd probably be working on a line somewhere and not owning 3 companies. Because I didn't really care about education at that time. I cared more about sports and women. But you know what? It's time that we understand that we can't force kids to learn. We can't use an assessment to say this is what you have to learn and make sure that they're achieving it. I spoke to one of the teachers in our district that's taught special ed for the last 18 years. And she goes, I love my job. Because over time, they begin to get it. And they begin to engage. And the education begins to blossom and their eyes light up. You can't mandate that. You can't legislate that. All you can do is allow your teachers to be unhandcuffed from testing, from the mandates of what they're going to be taught, that they have to read a script in front of the class, and allow them to be unhindered in meeting the needs of each individual kid in the classroom. And that will not come from Washington. That will not come from Columbus. That will come from your local elected school board standing up and doing the job that they were elected to do. So let's hold them to that. I will be around for questions after, and I hope that you've learned something today or that you've learned something over the last few months that has given you the courage to go in front of those 5 people in that school board who are just average people like you and I, who are elected to serve you as a constituency. And I hope that as you go and do that, you do it with respect, you do it with courage, and you do it with the truth. Because there's not one person in this room or on any school board in the state that can deny the truth that our kids are not an asset of the state. They're our greatest asset, our legacy. Thank you.